Index funds. I know you've probably heard tons about them, but a lot of people don't really understand like how they work, how long they've been around, and most importantly, which actual exchange traded funds track their performance. So let's get into it. My name is Dominique Broadway. I'm an award-winning personal finance expert and the founder of Finances Demystified. And today I want to talk to you about index funds, which may seem boring, but it's actually really good. It's good stuff. So people love index funds because they are set it and forget it. They are for the lazy investor. And when I say lazy, I don't mean it in a derogatory way. It's for those people who are like, look, I just want to put my money in, let my money grow, look back in a couple months or a couple years and see a big pot of gold. And that's what you want, then index funds are for you. So index funds are technically considered a new investment. They've been around, believe it or not, since about 1970, so a little over 40 years. They really haven't even been around that long, okay? So around 1970 is when ETFs or index funds really started to come about. And essentially what these indexes are basically almost like, I don't want to say like a popularity contest in a way, but really just a bundle or kind of like an index or a list of various stocks, right? That are all coming together and they're using these stocks to determine how the market's doing or how a specific industry is doing or how a specific sector is doing as well. So let's jump into some of the major indexes so you have an idea of who the major players are. So first up, we have one of our favorites, the S&P 500. We've all heard of the S&P 500. The S&P is up, the S&P is down. I'm sure you've heard that somewhere on the news, okay? So the S&P 500 is short for the Standard & Poor's 500. And essentially what it is one of the most leading and major indexes, okay? And this index tracks 500 of the top publicly traded companies in the US. Okay, so that is essentially what the S&P 500 is. So it is an index that tracks 500 of the top publicly traded companies. Now that's probably one of the most popular ones, which is the S&P 500. Next, let's go into another one of my favorites, which is the NASDAQ. So this is the NASDAQ 100 index is what's the long name of it. And this one tracks just 100 of the securities listed and traded on the NASDAQ stock market, okay? So going back, the S&P 500 tracks 500, and then the NASDAQ tracks just 100 of the securities trading on the NASDAQ stock exchange. Next, we have the Dow Jones. You probably have heard this as well. The Dow is up, the Dow is down. When they're talking about the Dow, they're referencing the Dow Jones, which is short for the Dow Jones Industrial Average. Now, this index only contains about 30 blue chip stocks. That's it, only about 30. So this is actually the smallest, I would say, index. This is one of the indexes that has like the smallest amount of, I guess, companies or stocks that they're actually tracking, okay? Next, we have the Wilshire 5000 Total Stock Market Index. Now, this one is probably not it's popular, but it's not as widely used as far as tracking the market, okay? And this is more of a total market index, and this is literally tracking the performance of the entire stock market. Last but not least, we have the Russell 2000 Index, which I feel like used to be a little bit more popular, but it's not as popular as it used to be. This one is tracking 2,000 of some of the smallest publicly traded companies. So that Russell 2000 Index is going to give you a really good indicator of how some of these small businesses or small companies, small publicly traded companies are performing, okay? Now, let's get into some of the ETFs or exchange traded funds that allow you to actually invest into some of these indexes, okay? So let's get into it. The first one here that we have, all right. Sorry, okay. So the first one that we have here, one of my favorites, is the Vanguard S&P 500 ETF. This ticker symbol is VOO. Now, this Vanguard S&P 500 ETF obviously does what we think it does. It tracks the S&P 500. Now, also keeping in mind, all of these ETFs that I'm mentioning to you, they're not investing directly into these indexes. They are literally tracking or mimicking how these indexes perform so that they can get similar returns, okay? So Vanguard S&P 500 ETF, ticker symbol VOO, allows you to invest or track the S&P 500. Another popular one, which is another one of my favorites that I trade all the time, is the SPY. This is the Spider S&P 500 ETF. Trust is the full name of it, and their ticker symbol is SPY, and they're another one that tracks the S&P 500. I'll give you one more, which is the iShares Core S&P 500 ETF, ticker symbol IVV. They also track the S&P 500. All right, now let's talk about some that track the NASDAQ. So if you would like to invest into the NASDAQ, the NASDAQ 100 index, those 100 really mainly top like tech companies, to be honest. One of my favorite ones is the Invesco QQQ Trust ETF. This is ticker symbol QQQ, all right? It's called the Invesco QQQ Trust ETF. Another major one that we have here is the Shelton NASDAQ 100 Index Direct. That ticker symbol is NASDX, all right? For the Russell 2000 ETF, remember the Russell 2000 is tracking 2,000 of the smallest publicly traded companies in the US. They have the Vanguard Russell 2000 ETF, ticker symbol VTWO. All right. One for the Dow Jones is the Spider Dow Jones Industrial Average ETF Trust, ticker symbol DIA. All right. And last but not least, this is another one that really just encompasses the total stock market, which is the Vanguard Total Stock Market ETF, ticker symbol VTI. And this one really is a fund that covers the entire universe of all the publicly traded stocks. So all of these funds, all of these ETFs that I mentioned to you, from the VTI to the DIA, the QQQ, the SPY, they are all going to give you exposure to the 2,000, the 5,000, the 100, or however many shares are tracked within an index. These are truly set it and forget it. They're for the lazy investor. And as I mentioned, ain't nothing wrong with being a lazy investor, but these are all great ETFs that allow you to track these indexes, to get really, really great market exposure, and to honestly just truly let your money grow for you without you having to lift a finger. Hopefully you enjoyed this brief explanation on index funds. If you have any questions, drop them below, but most importantly, subscribe, hit the like button, share it with a friend, and I'll see you in the next video.